All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to first session of day 3. For those of you on the back standing up, there's some room here in the splash zone. If you're not scared to get wet, come on up, find a seat. Today we're going to talk about what's new in vSphere 9, which is the core component of VCF, right? Most of you are using vSphere for many, many years, are very familiar with it, and a lot of the new features, new capabilities are coming within vSphere that get propagated up to VCF. My name is Dave Morera. I'm here with my colleague Bob Plankers, which probably needs no introduction. And with that, we're gonna get started. You've seen this a couple times this week, hopefully, which means you've been going to sessions. So nothing that we're gonna show here has not been announced. So everything it's been public. And so here's a word cloud that we put together, Bob put together actually, about this session, right? What is it that we're going to talk about? And vSphere by itself is not just vSphere, it's a lot of components, especially now with VCF 9, where things are more unified and talking to each other, more automation, more cohesive in a way. So with that, I'm gonna give it to Bob so he can take us through some of this stuff.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, and what Dave is saying, so I went through the release notes for this word cloud, and vSphere is still a thing. It's the core platform. We're part of the core platform technical marketing team. You've seen a lot of our coworkers this week. And it's really a pleasure to be able to talk about vSphere as the underpinnings of everything. And so let's talk about Lifecycle. We'll start there. We're always talking about Lifecycle, but patching is such a thing. Patching, nobody wants to patch. Nobody wants to upgrade, but it's a necessary thing, And so a few things going on in that world. One, you'll need a VCF operations instance, even a small one, moving forward with 9. I don't have that on the slide here, but I thought, hey, I should mention that here. So that'll be another component that gets deployed. That'll handle licensing and vCenter groups. I'll show you that in a minute here too. That's the replacement for enhanced linked mode. There's a new installer. So all the old ways are still there, but there's a new installer as well. The new installer can connect to online depots, can connect to to a depot that you create if you download a bundle and put it on a web server, that sort of thing. It's more flexible. It's got better storage options. VCF is learning to chill out a little bit, and vSphere is sort of learning how to manage at scale, so it's kind of meeting in the middle there. There's a new versioning thing. I'm not sure if people have talked about this at the conference here. I want to mention it a little bit. This is on our blog as well. There's a blog post in the Cloud Foundation blog for this, trying to bring a little bit more logic to, I know we all like 8 update 3 GS sorts of, pardon me just a second. I know we all like crazy numbering like that, but all the updates are gone. Now, we will still have updates, but they're going to be 9.1, 9.2, 9.3. They won't go past 9.3 because we're going to keep with the 3 updates. But this is going to be how it goes. 9.2.1, hypothetically speaking, would be a whole bundle patch for VCF and VVF. 9.2.1.2 is what you'll see for a security update or something like that, an asynchronous patch or just a one-off there. So. Hopefully makes sense. Upgrading. There's a direct path between 7 and 8 and 8 and 9, but you can't skip across from 7 to 9. The forklift upgrades have been much besmirched in, there's a lot of benefit to doing forklift upgrades and rebuilding an environment. You can turn on vSAN ESA. We're not going to talk about vSAN ESA at all, but 4 times more performance there. Just a ton of data protection capabilities that have been added and a lot of stuff. Our colleagues talk a lot about that, so we don't have to. But something to keep in mind is cross vCenter vMotion, for example, that where you can just vMotion things from 7 to 9. And if you set that up, if you try that, the one caveat I will warn you about, the distributed virtual switch on both sides has to be the same version. So when you set up your new environment, set it up with a version, and then you can just upgrade that later. Other stuff, while we're here, we should talk about end of general support. October 2nd is creeping up on us for 7, and October 11th, 2 more years for for version 8, for vSphere 8. And so there's also 18 months of extended support if that's of interest to you. And as far as support cadence and release cadence, 9 months. The update releases, the 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, that sort of thing, intended to have an interval of about 9 months. This is also up on our blog post with all the release data and stuff. I'm just stealing their graphics at this point. Some bad news, some good news. You know me, I'm always haven't shied away from, the way things are. Deprecations. Deprecations are things that are still in the product. You can absolutely use them. We will support them. But the next version, they're going to be removed. Removals are gone. So deprecations, I'm not going to go through the whole list. CPUs and I/O devices, when the original manufacturer can't support them or doesn't support them anymore, we really can't either. VCLS stuff is deprecated. We will all miss those greatly. The Elm, vVols on the bottom, there's been a lot of hullabaloo around that, but the enhanced link mode especially, that's going to be one. I'll talk about that in a little bit with vCenter groups, doing some federation instead. Things that have been removed, some of the big things here are part of our path towards identity federation, federating, not being an identity provider ourselves, but federating with a modern identity provider. From Symantec VIP on premises to things like Okta in the cloud. There's also generic support for that too. So other things, oops, I'm gonna back up. Oh, I just telegraphed my joke there. I wanted to mention the storage DRS stuff. That's for I/O latency. Storage DRS is still around, but I/O latency and that gets funky with all flash arrays and is really not necessary anymore, so that's gone. But one of the biggest removals, ESXi lost its I. And so it's just ESX now. The name is 25% more efficient, so that's good. But I mention it because, at least in my world, security and compliance, we're details-oriented sorts of folks. And I've had a number of questions. Are you talking about, no, we're not talking about ESX 4.1 from back in the day. Our branding people send their apologies, but we will just refer to it all as ESX moving forward or interchangeably. So know that we're talking about current things. As far as other Lifecycle stuff goes, we've got Lifecycle Manager. Lifecycle Manager has replaced Update Manager fully now, and that's good. The team that works on that has done an excellent job, and thank you for all your feedback, by the way. They have taken all that feedback and incorporated it into the product. You can have up to 4 images. It shouldn't really say mixed vendor. It's really just mixed configuration. That can be vendor or whatever. You can have up to 4 different images assigned automatically or manually to hosts in a cluster, and there's also all kinds of hierarchy too. And this is a good example of everything in our presentation today. Every slide has basically got at least one session on it here at the conference. And so being on Wednesday, I can't really tell you, most of them were yesterday and the day before, but look them up. There's recordings of them if you're interested. Another thing too, Live Patch. So Dave and I were on stage here last year and we announced Live Patch as part of vSphere 8 Update 3. The scope on that was so narrow that we haven't been able to use it yet. But 9 expands that scope quite a bit. And the vision for it is that about 80% of anything that ESX needs to be patched for should be live patchable, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, so 9, a security update, 2025-0013 was live patchable, for example. I have not been able to live patch because TPM-enabled hosts can't do it yet. And Dave did disclaim you about futures, so I can tell you 9.1. So you also can't skip versions, but the whole idea of live patching is that you don't need to because it's easy. You just do it and you can just keep rolling forward. The vCenter groups that I've been talking about as well. This is a replacement for enhanced link mode. It's done through VCF operations, and it's federation. So you don't have to, if you get that manageability still, the single pane of glass sort of view, but you don't have to treat them all identically. You don't have to snapshot them all together, and recovery got a lot easier. They just talk to each other as friends, not joined at the hip. Last thing I want to talk about before I turn this back over to Dave is SDKs. We've done a ton of work on APIs, SDKs, programmability, usability on the programming side, and a lot of work here, a lot of stuff on our blog about this as well. And Power CLI especially, lots of new stuff there. It's now vcf.powercli, not vmware.powercli if you're looking for it. So with that, Dave, I give it back to you, man.
All right. Thanks, Bob. That was nice and concise for once. Thanks.
Dave's been giving me stuff about talking.
He usually just
Tangents.
gets talking. But anyway, so I'm going to talk about resource management, one of the areas that I cover within the vSphere side. And of course, I'm going to talk about memory tiering. It's pretty much my baby. I've been working on this for a very, very long time. You may know this as Project Capitola from a couple years ago, where we came out and say, hey, we're going to work on some kind of technology to help you with some of the issues that we're seeing out there as far as memory goes. One of those issues is what memory is very, very expensive, right? If you were to go out and build a bomb right now for new servers, you would understand that about 80% of that cost is going to be memory only. Now you have to factor in number of DIMMs, density of those DIMMs, DDR5 versus DDR4, right? What's the right balance between performance, capacity, all that cool stuff. But yeah, it becomes very expensive. And just even the size, the density of those DIMMs have been pretty much flat compared with the cores on CPUs. So the cores are doubling, tripling every 6 months, every 9 months, but memory has been staying pretty flat lately. So this is where we come in. We understand that problem of scaling your memory and also the cost of it. So we want to provide a solution for that. We also want you to have a better VM consolidation because we understand that there are a lot of the hosts are memory bound because of this issue. And also, those hosts that are memory bound cannot use a lot of that CPU because the CPU needs to talk to the memory needs to talk to the CPU. If memory is full, CPU can't really do much more. So what we've done is leveraging cheaper devices like NVMe. They still need to be fast enough to act as memory, but we're leveraging this device as part of memory tiering. So what we're doing is taking NVMe, placing it pretty much underneath DRAM, and presenting that to hosts and VMs as one logical unit for memory. So think of this as what we did for vSAN in the early days. We had fast cache, and then spinning Rust backing that up to put the data that is kind of slower, right? And then we move the data that's being read and written to the top, to the fast portion. So we're doing something similar with memory pages in this case. So we're presenting that as a unified memory solution to VMs. VMs have no idea what's going on. They just know, hey, I have this much more memory. The host says, hey, you increased my memory now to 2x. Thank you. And then we're able to look at the activeness of those memory pages and make decisions based on that. When we're pushing memory to 80, 75%, then we start acting up and saying, okay, whole pages that are not doing anything, we're gonna move those down to NVMe and free up all that DRAM back to the host. And for those hosts that are memory bound, we're gonna also be able to utilize CPU even more. So this is a great solution on VCF 9, obviously part of vSphere 9. So you can have a better VM consolidation and run more of those CPU utilization on your servers. Now, I do have a deep dive session on this later today. I think it's this same room around 12:45. If you want to learn more about this, I run through some of the new things here. On vSphere 8.0U3, we had a beta tech preview. And it wasn't as good as what we have right now. So kudos to engineering for, I don't know how they did it, but they did a lot in that short period of time. And now we're supporting mixed clusters, and this is different than the mixed clusters that Bob talked about. This mixed clusters means that some of your hosts can be enabled for memory tiering, some can be disabled. So we're not forcing you to configure your entire cluster this way. Obviously, we always want the clusters to be configured the same way. But this could be the use case where some of your workloads may not qualify for memory tiering. Maybe their active memory is too high, so you can disable a host, or you can even disable a VM at that level for memory tiering. We also support RAID. We understand, hey, this is very important. Devices die, so we want redundancy. So we do support hardware-based RAID. It could be RAID 1, RAID 10, it's up to you. And also support VROC tri-mode as well. A lot of improvements were done on DRS. DRS is aware of what's happening, and a lot of performance improvements on the back end that is leading us to this ratio that we talk about here. And in the beta version, in the tech preview, the ratio of DRAM to NVMe was a 4-to-1. That means that if you have a host with 1 terabyte of memory, you would enable memory tiering in vSphere 8.0 U3, and it gives you 256 gigs of additional memory. Not too bad, 25%, but we always want more, right? Especially when it comes to memory. So because of these improvements, we were able to increase that ratio to a 1-to-1. So that same host with 1 terabyte of DRAM, you enable memory tiering now on vSphere 9, VCF 9, and it gives you an additional 1 terabyte of memory, right? For the cost of 1 drive, instead of buying many DIMMs, which is thousands and thousands of dollars. So here we're increasing your VM density. Obviously, this leads to less licensing, less servers, less cooling. So there's a lot of benefits to that. All right, moving on to other features. vMotion improvements. We did that. There's a lot of improvements besides VMs running vGPUs, but this one was a big one, in my opinion. We noticed that when we were doing vMotion on these VMs with GPUs, virtual GPUs, it was taking a long time, not just to vMotion, but that stun time, the fast suspend resume time, was taking almost a minute. So we're talking 45 seconds, almost to a minute. And so that is definitely a problem, right? Especially for AI ML workloads. So what we did is we looked into this, we looked at vMotion and made a lot of improvements, and we were able to knock that down to about 2 seconds. So that pause, when it happens for vMotion, took it from 1 minute down to 2 seconds. So that is amazing, in my opinion, just to see that improvement. Keeping up with vGPUs, now we have profile visibility. So within the vCenter UI, now you can see all your vGPU profiles, what is being used, which VMs are using it. So it allows you not only to see what's being used, but also helps you plan when you want to create new workloads using vGPUs. Also, we have intelligent placement with DRS, and this was actually pretty neat, right? It's intelligence built in that makes room for your new workloads rather than just failing and telling you, hey, you don't have enough resources. And one example is having, let's say, a small cluster, three nodes, which usually have at least 4, actually. Let's say you have 3. Each host has 4 GPUs, and you have 1 VM on each host with 2 vGPUs. So if I were to create a VM with 4 GPUs, there is no room, right? They're all using half of each host. So DRS will come in and say, okay, I got you. Instead of giving me an error and a fail, and it's going to say, I'll help you out. Takes one of those VMs, moves them over automatically. Now it frees up one of the hosts entirely for that new workload I'm creating with 4 GPUs. Number 4 here is network I/O control for vMotion and unified data transfer protocol. So this was introduced in vSphere 8 to allow us to move data really fast for cold migrations. The problem here is that we pushed it so hard, we were able to use a lot of the bandwidth, which is great, right? It gives us a lot of speed for those migrations, but we started to see that maybe the management aspect of it, the management traffic was being affected. So now we need a way to mitigate that, and this is where network I/O control comes in. So now you're able to enable that in that particular network traffic, so that it doesn't affect the management aspect of it, the performance of it. And number 5, compute policies for workload licensing. So there are some particular workloads, I'm not going to name them, that require you to license based on how many hosts you can run that particular application on host, what number of hosts. So what customers are doing is they're pinning that VM to this particular host and doing some manual work for that. So now we have a tag-based policy where you can go in and tell a VM, okay, I want you to run on n+1 for redundancy. So maybe 2+1. So I'm telling this application, this VM, you can run on this, I'm not telling which host, I'm saying you can run on 3 hosts. You figure it out, I'm done, right? I can show for licensing and compliance that this application only runs on 3 hosts. If one of the hosts goes down, then it would automatically select 3 other hosts. So it doesn't really matter how many hosts you have in the cluster. It's always going to run and keep it in that 3 host range so that you can show, hey, For licensing and compliance, I'm only using 3. All right, we're also extending the the virtual devices capabilities. So we've been able to do this for stunnable devices, adding vGPU, memory, NICs, things like that. But there are some devices that were not supported, so you had to shut down the VM, add CPUs, memory, and NICs. So we expanded that capability, and some of those stunnable devices include like Intel Dynamic Load Balancer and some of the GPUs from AMD, the MI200, for example. Now, we announced support for AMD GPUs, so that's going to come in later, where this may or may not apply. So I'm actually very excited for that moving forward. I did talk about the UDT, so this is what it would look like. You were able to control the traffic on system traffic and pretty much enable network I/O control there. All right. And this is the licensing aspect for compliance. So here's an animation of you can tell the host, the VM, hey, you can run on 3 particular hosts. You choose, this is the policy I'm giving you. If one of them fails, then you figure it out and choose some other 3 hosts where you can run. So you can always meet that policy and always show, hey, licensing-wise, I'm running on 3, not more than that. All right, one new feature also again, I talked about how now vSphere is not just vSphere, right? We also talk about vSense integrated, vSphere Kubernetes services, supervisor, all this stuff is coming in together more and more. So we've seen occasions where customers want to move things to the supervisor or start with the supervisor. But now you're able to import some of those VMs from your hypervisor into the supervisor for management purposes. So we can easily move them in, and then the supervisor will take over for the management purpose. All right, speaking of Kubernetes, so here a couple slides on this. We understand also that the adoption of this could be quite difficult, especially on earlier versions. And I remember me starting with Kubernetes, and it was kind of complicated. You had to do a lot of things in a row to be able to get running. Once you get running, yeah, great. So now we're introducing this modular approach of the platform, where you can start very, very small. You don't need a full cluster on the control plane. You can start very small, have a single control plane VM, single network, no load balancing needed. But you don't have to stop there. You can expand as you get more comfortable, as you grow. So later on, you can say, hey, this looks great. I have a lot more workloads running on this Kubernetes service. Now I want to expand. So you can add a load balancer later on easily. Just add another module to it. And then you can say, okay, now I want to expand and make it a cluster for my control plane where I can have more of those VMs or add another network. So this modular approach lets you start small, kick the tires, get used to it, get comfortable with it, and then move up from there. We have also introduced, speaking of load balancing, a new out-of-the-box load balancer. We call it Foundation Load Balancer. So it allows you to create those networks necessary for the Kubernetes side. And it's pretty much a layer 4 load balancer. This is not your Avi Essentials or HA proxies. Another solution that, again, lets you get started easily and small and then scale up from there. And something else that we did, and I think this is great, is part of lifecycle management in a way. Previously, before we came up with this solution of pretty much separating the control plane updates and the vCenter updates, you had to update vCenter first in order to be able to update your control plane, right? So that dependency really pushed a lot of people off from doing updates, and then they start lagging because, right, upgrading your vCenter takes a little bit more preparation and careful planning. So now we decouple that, and you can directly update your control plane without having to update your vCenter. So decoupling that and making that an asynchronous and independent function in your environment. All right, and one last thing, this is something they talked about on the keynote, and I think this is pretty neat. So you've heard about VMware Private AI Foundation, and this is something we worked on for the last 3 years or so. And that is a way to get you started with AI workloads easy. And now we're adding services on top of that. So one of the things they announced, which I'm very excited, is that all this, not just the foundation portion, these private AI services are also part of VCF. So once you go to VCF, now you have access to Private AI Foundation and the Private AI services. The Private AI services has this 4 different services that all act as one that allows you to get started on the software side. So you need models that are already trained. I'm pretty sure you don't want to train your own models. That would take a lot of money, a lot of GPUs. But it allows you to go out and have a model gallery. So you can go out for example, to Hugging Face and grab some of those models, bring them down, and through the model runtime and API gateway, now you can distribute those models and give your developers, your data scientists access to them, and they can pick and choose what they want to use and leverage for all these other services that come next. The last 2 services is where the magic happens. The data indexing and retrieval, we call it REX for some reason. I don't know, it just sounds cool. So REX, what it does is that it's actually going to be able to utilize these tools. So I think AI is a great tool. The models are trained, it knows how to talk to humans, it knows how to respond to humans. But the value comes when you put your data, your enterprise data into it, and you can use it securely in your on-prem environment, right? So Rex goes in and it can create knowledge bases based on whatever topics you want. So you can feed it PowerPoint presentations, PDF files, Word documents, whatever you want. Feed it into Rex. We're gonna index that and then use it as part of the process later on with our agent, right? So when you need to get information that is internal to your environment, you don't want it out in the cloud, but you want to be able to leverage it, that's where Rex comes in. And lastly, Agent Builder. So here we're allowing you to leverage everything we've done up to this point. So the models they're already trained, the open source models, being able to connect to them, being able to leverage them, and also have that retrieval augmented generation from Rex. And here you can create an agent that says, hey, it's a chatbot, for example, and give it to tech support. Now tech support can go out and look, oh, this person can't log into Office 365, what is going on? And you already have a knowledge base created there that is gonna look into your information and tell you, hey, these are the credentials that you need to use, for example, and so forth. So there's a lot that is happening here, but we take you through all this process. It's super easy. We have a demo on the booth at the hub, which I've created. So it takes you through the process of enabling all this, feeding the data, and getting that data back out. All right, so with that, I'll give it back to Bob for some
security compliance. Me talking about that? That's crazy. The what Dave just talked about, the fact that Kubernetes is built right into the platform, the fact that AI stuff is built right in, and especially a lot of the work that we're doing right now to make AI just one of the gang as far as a workload is concerned. You know, a decade of work to just to be able to move workloads around such that you can patch. You know, you don't have to go talk to your AI folks. You can let the AI folks think that they're special. Yes, your mother was correct. You are special. You know, but at the workload layer, yeah, you're not special. Sorry, you're just one of everything else. We're doing a lot of work in security, not just patching. All that patching stuff is security too, but we're doing a lot of work in the core hypervisor itself. And ESX, we keep talking about code signing and that exec installed only. It's because the ecosystem has inertia to it. And you know, getting all those partners to make sure that all their stuff is signed correctly and doing all that, it's been a process. They're still not universally doing it, but if you if you disable this function now, you will get an undismissible warning that you have a security problem, and that is true. You have a security problem. Don't do that. You get secure boot. So UEFI firmware is the way to go. UEFI boot, and we are no longer certifying any legacy boot. And that's not even just it's not to force secure boot per se. It's actually because ESX with NSX and all that stuff has grown just a little bit past the legacy boot memory window that's available there. So Secure Boot's been around for 16 years. We should probably start using it. User level monitor. So operating systems have got this concept, actually CPUs have got a concept of security levels. In Intel CPUs, there's rings, ring 0, ring 1, ring 2. There's actually negative rings as well. And and operating systems use those, map them roughly into kernel mode and user mode. And kernel mode has no permission model whatsoever. It's all gas, no brakes. And so all hypervisors until ESX9 have used that because of performance, try to make everything run as fast as possible. Well, there's certain problems with that. If somebody is able to break into your guest operating system, sometimes they can get out a VM escape and get out into the hypervisor, get out into things that you don't want them to be in, obviously. And so what if we deprivileged all of that? What if we took it and ran the virtual machine monitor in user mode? And so that's what's starting in 9. It's not on by default everywhere, but if you turn on memory tiering or if you turn on confidential computing, it will be there, and that'll be the case. And so I should say as far as performance, you might be thinking, well, Bob, you mentioned performance. CPU manufacturers have done some work to help us mitigate the performance difference there so that we can have security, but also be fast. Mandatory access control. So around all the workloads, around the container runtime and the VM runtime is a sandbox. And that's been there for a long time at this point. And so we've extended that to scripts. We've extended that to processes, other processes on a host, the SSHs and NTPDs and all of that stuff, so that they have those protections too. And actually, it's not so much that they have protections, but that ESX has protections from them should there be something wrong with those things. And then I mentioned confidential computing. We've had confidential computing in our platform since vSphere 7 and AMD SEVES support and Intel SGX back then. Now the CPU manufacturers have their follow-ons to this, and we've got that support for that functionality in 9 now, and that'll get better. These particular follow-ons to these technologies, TDX and SEV, SNP, they allow for things in the future, such as vMotion to come back. And again, we're trying to make these secure workloads just one of the gang. I talked earlier about identity management. Identity management and identity brokers are a big part of security and keeping people out of where they shouldn't be, detecting problems, all that. And in vSphere 8, we introduced a broker, the identity broker, in vCenter. That continues in vCenter, but it has evolved now as well. It also, that broker is in vCenter, and that's the embedded one. As part of VVF, you can also deploy it as a separate appliance or a separate appliance cluster if you'd like high availability for that. One of the big ones here, though, we've brought back SAML support, OIDC support. You don't just have to, all these icons on the screen here, you don't have to pick one of those. You can pick JRandom authentication provider. I mean, it is important to your environment, so please use some discretion. But you can connect to whatever you want at this point. And so that's really nice. Another thing too, key wrapping. So data at rest encryption. Hopefully you're all using it, turn it on. vSAN makes it really easy to turn on. It's a background process, set it and forget it. Native key provider too is all built into VCF and vSphere and allows you to get rolling with encryption really easily and securely. And but the standard key provider's been around for quite a while, and that talks to an external KMS. And a lot of organizations are using external KMSs, and there's good use cases for that. But one of the problems with the KMS is we never delete the keys. So there's two keys classically with data at rest encryption. There's a data encryption key, which encrypts the object itself. There's a key encryption key, which encrypts the data encryption key. And you might say, why do you do that? Well, that separation allows us to move it around and to virtualize it really well and control access. And so that key encryption key is stored in a KMS somewhere. We never delete that because we don't know that you're not still using it. But that also means that it will accumulate. And so large organizations, especially VDI environments, will accumulate thousands and thousands of keys that aren't really necessary anymore. So we were asked, hey, can you do something about this? Simultaneously, so can we get rid of all of that, all the extra keys? Simultaneously, can we build something that rotates the keys on a periodic basis? Yeah, actually we can. We did it together. So we've got a third key. We're a virtualization company. Everything, all problems are solvable with another layer of abstraction, right? You know, and so third key, a wrapping key. We store that wrapping key out in the KMS, and so now you've got one key in the KMS. Or if you set up the rotation interval for 30 days, after a year, you'll have 12 keys. But that's a lot less than you had before. You can't turn it on an existing key provider, but you can create a new key provider and then just do a shallow rekey into it. And the security GitHub repository has got sample code in it to show you how to do that. It's very automatable. I want to talk about workloads and guest operating systems. You know, that's the whole point of these environments, right? To actually run something that gets something done. And I'll start with storage. I didn't quite know where to put storage in the presentation, so here's a good spot for it. Storage continues to be the foundation. I mentioned vSAN, and vSAN ESA is tremendous. We've got NFS support. We'll continue to have it. We can do space reclamation on NFS support, so rethin things. We've got authentication for NVMe over fabrics. For end-to-end 4K blocks, we've got Kerberized encryption, the NFS encryption, and integrity checking, depending on how you want to set that up. And we've also got the ability now to move content libraries. Thank you for the feedback there. That was a good idea. And so it's in there now. You can basically storage vMotion them. Another thing, NSX is sort of being subsumed into the fabric of the core there. You know, and so we're starting to see things that are just becoming available, features just becoming available in vCenter and in ESX that are just there, you know, and VPCs are one of them. The ability to create an isolated network segment at will, whenever you want, you know, don't tell your network guys that you're doing this, but you can configure them. They can be routable, they can be not routable, however you want, and you can do it from vCenter, just making it faster and easier just to get your work done and move on, right? Question for the ages, and I put this in here knowing that there's hullabaloo, there's always, should I update my VM version? With all of the new support for things, we've revved the VM version now to 22. And I've made a list of, sorry for the eye chart here, but made a list of things in version 20 as well, and 22. I know we're all super excited about the 24 terabytes of RAM on a VM and things, but a lot of really interesting things go in here. And should you update? You know, we've got a KB article that says don't update, you know, but that's because people do it without testing and then perhaps things break. You know, do it in a controlled environment. I wanted really to mention that if you take a snapshot of your VM, that captures the VM hardware version as well. So you can try the update. If it fails, you can revert. So I also want to talk about that last line there, latest CPU and guest OS support. That really comes down to the guest OS side of things. There are a few things from time to time that require a rev in the hardware version too, but a lot of that is VMware Tools versioning and VMware Tools availability. And our tools team does a great job of maintaining that. Certainly things that are older, you know, we always talk about the latest and greatest, but I made a comment a few weeks back about supporting old stuff too, and the flexibility to continue running things. I was challenged by a guy at Tech Field Day to put my money where my mouth is, for example, and Windows 3.1 still runs just fine on VCF 9. Not that you should, just because you can doesn't mean you should, you know, but, you know, and obviously I can't support running old stuff that isn't getting patches. But this is one of the real powers of the platform, that it's, you know, you see, and we say it sometimes too, opinionated platforms and that. We're not opinionated. We want you to get your work done. We want you to be flexible. We want you to be able to do whatever it is you need to do. I should also mention too that that Windows VM, sure, it doesn't have VMware Tools, but if the host it was on failed, HA would restart it. It gets all of the resilience of the platform just by default. And that's terrific. So this is pretty much the end of our talk. Thank you, Dave, for accompanying me here.
Yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to add. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. There were things that Bob talked about. I talked about lifecycle management, configuration profiles, live patching, and even be able to see, like, create VPCs from vCenter. A lot of that stuff now includes NSX bits. So you can actually enable your transfer nodes from configuration profiles in vCenter You can now create VPCs from vCenter UI. You can live patch NSX from vCenter UI. So you don't even have to log into your NSX manager anymore to do a lot of things. So if you're not familiar with NSX, if that is a roadblock for you adopting VCF 9, as you can see, we're bringing a lot of the stuff into the VCFD, vCenter UI, to make it even easier for you to just stay in the UI that you know and move past that and get the adoption going. So those are tidbits that I noticed that I think they're very important for you guys. If you're not familiar with NSX Manager, it could be overwhelming sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of nice that you can just stay in that UI and do a lot of stuff from there.
Excellent, yeah. We've got a little bit of extra time, which I know in my talks is odd. If anybody's got any questions, we could take a few. Yeah. The question is about vVols. Is there a feature that's going to replace that? I think I'm not a storage expert, so I'm going to sound like I'm being cautious, and I am, because I don't want to tell you something that isn't true. I think the leanings are towards using just the normal interfaces here that try to drive some complexity out of that. So there have been some sessions on vVols, and we should get you a real answer. I suspect the folks in the booth know the real answer to that, and we should ask them. So sorry. So,
all right, for those of you leaving,
hey, take your survey, please. Thank you.
Please take your survey.
I like 5 stars, by the way.
Yep.
So,
thank you.